Well, another happy Tuesday Rare Leader Conversation. Thank you for joining us. I am Tori Jalen, joined by the wonderful Danielle Jalen. Hi, Danielle.
Hello.
Hey, we're picking up our conversation from last week when it comes to confidence. This is called the confidence check. And the question we're going to be looking at today is, how do I know I have lost confidence? And we're going to go through 6 indicators of it. And here's what I think about, the problem is a single symptom can mean like more than one thing. So, for example, you got a cold, you got a flu. There's usually little indicators that it's coming on. I know when I'm starting to feel underneath the weather, I'm like, oh, I gotta drink more water because I feel like there's something coming on. And so there's those are called symptoms. And there's symptoms that if we can actually become aware of it, can make us realize, oh, wait a second, there's some holes or cracks in my confidence. So we're going to share some of the things that I've learned over the years in terms of, hey, my confidence may have been taking a hit. I may have lost it. And if you have comments, things that you want to share, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook group or on Twitter, please feel free to go ahead and put it in there as well. So here's one, Danielle, that you may have lost confidence is you apologize a lot. How can this be an indicator that you may have lost confidence?
I think that if you're apologizing a lot, it's kind of an indication that you are not sure of yourself. You're not sure of the decisions you were making. You're letting people down. Um, so you're constantly apologizing for everything that you do.
And when I did it, I'm like, I was apologizing, I think, for things automatically where they're my fault or not. And so for some reason, I was always making this assumption I was in the wrong somehow. And what it did, it actually cast a doubt on my own actions. All right. So um, that's one thing is like, hey, if a kid's, for example, you're coaching kids and a kid's constantly apologizing for doing something wrong, like for every mistake, even though we know winning like mistakes is part of the formula to winning. It's probably an indicator. Okay, there's something going on there. Here's another indicator. Ooh, this is good. You overreact to critics. A confident person can accept criticism. They say if you really want to know how to handle criticism better, become a referee. Because you're going to get a ton of criticism as a referee from the fans. Um, why is it that when you obsess over what someone else has to say and react to it, it's like a sign of a lack of confidence?
Well, I think you're letting them dictate like your worth. Then you're feeling like you're being attacked and what you do isn't good enough. And when you're starting to feel that way, it's most likely just an indication that you're not confident in your abilities and who you are.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like you have to be overconfident, but I think sometimes, you know, when you're showing lack of confidence in your abilities, especially in those areas you're being criticized, that's when we start to go, wait a second, I should be good in here. It's like that should mentality starts to come in, then we should all over ourselves, right? Um, Another one, which I realize this with me, is that you pull away from social situations. For me, at times, I would stay home because I was afraid that I would not fit in, thinking like no one's going to talk to me, or um, worrying that no one's going to like me, or I'm going to be like not be able to have those conversations with people in there. Have you ever experienced it, Danielle, where you pull away from social situations?
Yeah, just you don't want to be around people. You think that you're constantly going to be judged by what you're wearing or what you say or what you don't say, or if you talk too much, if you're not talking enough. Um, and just you start to overthink everything about being with people.
Yeah, it's one of those things I call the wounded avoider. The people that used to have a great relationship with you, but all of a sudden they start going away from you, and there's no particular reason from your side that you can see. And And for me, it's times it's like, I'd walk away from those social situations because I wasn't doing the things I know I needed to do. And they call that sometimes the imposter syndrome. And I'm like, man, like, and I didn't recognize that until people go, we don't ever come around anymore. And I go, I'm busy. Like, I used the busy excuse, but that's not really was the real reason. It's like, I just didn't want to be around people. But when you dig deeper, you pull away the layers, like, wait a second. That actually can be an indicator of um, you might have lost some confidence. Here's another one. You are defensive. We become defensive when we can't come up with good reasons to support our positions. This may mean that you're not confident in what you're saying or what you believe. You know, I think one of the things too is if someone's giving you feedback, what's your first reaction to that feedback? To receive it or defend it? You know, what like when you're like had this different situation today, when you found like yourself getting defensive, what were some of the reasons why you thought you were getting defensive? And it may not have been anything external, but may have been more internal.
Well, just knowing like if I wasn't doing the things that I put out there that I would want to be doing, um, I'd start to get defensive over different things, like making excuses as to why things were the way that they were, or whatever.
That's interesting you say that. You got defensive because you put things out there and that you weren't doing it, and then basically someone was asking you about it or calling you out on that. Is that you think is sometimes the reason why people don't want to go ahead and publicly proclaim their goals as well?
It's possible, like they don't necessarily need the external um, compliment or encouragement or whatever criticism for doing or not doing something that they said they were going to do. And every journey is different, and so even though you may have a goal out there, the way that you get there isn't always necessarily going to be exact, and there may be bumps in the road that come up, and then all of a sudden you're having to defend why you didn't do what you said you were going to do at the time that you said you were going to do it.
But why do we have to be defensive though? Like sometimes can we just call it what it is? Like I just didn't do it. Like why do we sometimes like lean to defending what we didn't do, what we said we do, versus just saying, yeah, I didn't do it.
Because then you still have to explain why you didn't do it, and then the things that come out may sound like excuses to other people that really aren't excuses. They're just legitimate reasons why it didn't happen.
Interesting. I literally had a conversation with someone this morning, and they were going to send an email in regards to something, and they're like, "Yeah, I know I didn't send the email, but I have a valid reason." And I just listened, and I didn't say anything. I just listened, and they're like, "Yeah, I know that sounded like an excuse, and it probably was, but it shows to you that at least it's top of mind for me." You know, um, another thing that I feel is like an indicator of you may have lost some confidence is that you obsess about your problems. You're focusing on how things are going wrong. That's like a victim mentality, or you're constantly worried about your problems. All show you have like no confidence that you can control, except eventually change your situation. That's a big thing. It could be an area too. Like you may be confident in your health, but you may not be confident in your relationships. You may not be confident in your finances. You may not be confident in your work. Um, but I think this is an indicator to watch out for because, and the biggest part of this is that you're not showing that you have confidence that you can actually change the situations. Like, why do we sometimes put so much more energy into the problem versus the solution?
Well, I think it's easy to just let the negative overwhelm you at points, like not even realizing that it's happening. And then just become focused on what's not working or what's not going right for you versus how you can fix it.
Mhm.
That takes energy and effort.
Right. Right, but, like, we get like, I know there's times which I'll, like, obsess over the problem, like, "Oh my gosh," and I feel it when it happens, and that feeling just sucks, you know? But then I think when you can flip the coin and obsess about the solutions, like, "Okay, here's how I can get through this." I will get sometimes from people, "Hey, you're Mr. Positive, Mr. Positive," and I talked about this on a previous podcast. Um, Being positive doesn't mean that I don't see the challenges in front of me. Being positive means I see the challenges and I know I'm gonna get through that, right? But that's where you have to have the mental shift from going from a victim mentality to a victor mentality. Things aren't happening to me, they're happening for me. All happens in the struggle and growth will happen in the valley before you get to the mountaintop. Here's another one. Another indicator. You lack energy. It's tiring, at least for me, when I'm constantly stressed and worried. And what I've learned is that I get a lethargic attitude toward the world. Like, I mean, I got a lot on my mind that's just weighing me down. It leads you to a lot of time watching TV, eating for energy, and sleeping a lot more than you intend to. That is, if you can fall asleep. Have you ever found this happen to you, Danielle?
Oh, not being able to fall asleep, I fall asleep. Um, but yeah, and, like, lacking energy just so, like, you just all of a sudden just are like, "Meh," and like, "Oh, I'll just do it later," and you start to procrastinate on different things because you start to use your feel like as your direction of how you're gonna attempt to attack the day.
Yeah. Um, but those are just like a handful of simple indicators that can say, hey, you know, you might have lost your confidence. And another one that's a big one for a lot of people is that you're playing a role. What do I mean by that? It's like when you feel like you just can't be yourself. And if you're having to create a persona just to step into the world, if you're using a fake you to impress people, I've been there. I've done it. I've put on like, yeah, here we go. You know, this may mean that you're actually feeling particularly confident about who you are. What other things makes it tough if you're playing a role?
Well, that just goes into the lack of energy. Like you're constantly using energy to put on a front that, and then you have to remember what that front looked like each time that you're around different people. Like, it's interesting to be like this way around one person, and then the world sucks around that person. And this is great about this, like around that person. And then all of a sudden you're just like, who am I anymore?
Right. The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thinks that takes work. That takes a lot of work. That's talk can turn the switch and off, on and off, and just be who you are, right? Because you are amazing. You are a gift. Um, and then I think another indicator of it is your self-talk is negative. I don't know about you, Danielle, but when I feel like my um, confidence is low, my internal dialogue isn't that great.
Yeah, you start to tell yourself all the things that you're doing wrong and what you can be better at, and constantly like just down on yourself about everything that's going on.
Hmm. I mean, it's like the saying of like, hey, people call themselves fat. Well, like I'm fat. Okay, well, that may be true, but you don't need to constantly like feed into that energy, right? If you're calling yourself a failure, pointing out every flaw and weakness, and putting yourself down all the time, then you're not only suffering from weak confidence, you're driving it down even lower. Like the ultimate motivator is not external, it's the person looking in the mirror. Is it the good wolf you're feeding or the bad wolf you're feeding? And that's where it comes down to the next one. You're hanging out with the wrong crowd. Why is that an indicator that you may have lost confidence?
Well, you start to end up surrounding yourself with the person that you've created yourself to be, and you get stuck with people that are just as negative as you then, if not worse, and it just keeps you in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and what happens like, "Oh, I'm not worthy of, being around XYZ people. I'm not worthy of doing that." And so we lower our standards, many times. I'll tell you where you're going to be in 5 years by the books that you read and the people that you hang around with. Here's another one. You play things super safe. When you're not confident in your ability to have a good outcome in a situation, it's not unusual to play things really safe to the point where either you're not trying anything new, or if you are, you're involving minimal personal risk. Have you ever found yourself in this situation?
Yeah, just making the decisions that I know that the outcome is going to be favorable versus it may challenge you to have to go outside your comfort zone a little bit more.
Yeah. Because sometimes too, it's like you're not doing things. A lack of confidence actually keeps you safe at home instead of like going out there and like living your life. Because you might be afraid of a disastrous outcome. Oh, you're not confident how you're going to deal with people or situations you don't know well. You know, I think this is a big thing to think is people, well, you don't want to take risks. I get that, right? You don't want to be haphazard about things. I'm not gonna go and sit and be evil Knievel and jump on a motorcycle and go off a ramp. I'm not talking like that. I'm talking that there's things that you could do, but you don't. And I've done this. I've done it for years in which, there's different roles I want to take, whether it be in leadership, whether it be in what it might be, that I didn't realize that I didn't take those roles because I lacked confidence. Like, part of me outwardly says, I can do it, but inside there was this lack of confidence. It may not have been it was a lack of confidence always in myself, but a lack of confidence of not knowing what can happen, lack of fear, like operating from a place of fear versus faith, and faith and fear cannot coexist. And I'm just so grateful for my bride and Danielle of her constant encouragement saying, you can go do it. You can do it. Hey, I'm by your side. I'm gonna do it. And that's an important thing. So make sure you surround yourself with a good spouse. But so those are just a handful of indicators. And you know, if this list that we just shared with you may have left you cringing, I just want to encourage you to address the problems causing the drop in the confidence in the first place. Like, how did you get to this state? And sometimes we just got to stop and ask ourselves, like, how did I get here? Because it didn't happen overnight. You didn't gain, that 10 pounds overnight. One trip to the McDonald's drive-through didn't make you gain 10 pounds overnight. It was a series of events. What were those events? And what can you learn from those events? Because there's a million reasons why we may lose our confidence. And there's many triggers that we may have picked up over the years. But what we need to remember is some of these things might cause you to lose confidence completely while others don't bother you at all. So, um, next week, we're going to talk about common confidence blasting situations, triggers. And so you're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be very interesting. So, Danielle, as we finish up here, what would you say some final thoughts for you?
It just as you kind of reference, like it didn't happen overnight, and just to take a look at like where are the areas that you started to let yourself down and back off of each and every day that you can put back into place to start to correct that path.
The saying says, experience tells you what to do, confidence allows you to do it. And confidence is a muscle, it's a skill, and It's something you got to work at each and every day. So, for those of you watching, if you found value in today's conversation, we do encourage you to share this. Look at Rare Leaders on YouTube, subscribe, and share. Push the like button. And then on Facebook is Rare Leaders. Just look up for groups, Rare Leaders, and then Twitter is just Tony Jalen. Until next week, make sure, like I said, you're going to want to be here. It's going to be a banger, as Ezekiel would say. Common confidence blasting situations. Until next week, I am Tony Jalen, joined by the wonderful Danielle Jalen. Go out and be a Rare Leader. Rise up.